Hello, I'm Jason Dean and I run the website bangontime.info, which is a help resource for guys who struggle with premature ejaculation. Now, I also work full-time as a psychological therapist, and that side of things has been completely flat out due to COVID, the pandemic, lockdowns, all the stresses around that. And I haven't had a great deal of time to devote to Bang on Time. So I just wanted to put together a quick video now to answer a couple of questions that frequently arise and provide a bit of clarity on a few premature ejaculation fundamentals. So is premature ejaculation all in the mind? Is it primarily a psychological thing? Well, my answer to this would be absolutely yes, premature ejaculation is in the mind, but it's not all in the mind. It's in other places as well. So what do I mean by this? We look at premature ejaculation as a biopsychosocial issue. Now, I know that sounds really complicated and like, oh my God, how do I overcome something as bad as a biopsychosocial issue? But actually, that insight and understanding makes it a lot more treatable and a lot more easy to overcome. So to break that down, the biological, the bio side of things, we know that some guys are wired to last longer at intercourse than others. This is based possibly on their blood flow, their body composition, their circulation. It could be brain chemicals, it could be their medical history, it could be skin sensitivity down below. For a number of reasons, some guys have a predisposition towards coming a bit sooner than others. And really this kind of applies to any activity, anything that we do, like running or weightlifting. You know, some guys are naturally better at it than others, and why should that be any different for sex? On the psychological side of things, let's say that guy starts out in his sex life and he notices a pattern that he tends to come a bit sooner or sooner than he wanted to, and it happens again and it happens with different partners, and an insecurity, an anxiety, a fear can set in, that self-talk of there's something wrong with me or I can't do this. Anxiety starts to build up and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then moving on to the social side of things, let's look at that guy's relationship. Maybe he perceives that he gets feedback from his partners that says, this is unsatisfying, you can't do this. Maybe he feels an awkwardness, relationship insecurity, he can't hold on to a partner. So that's the social relationship factor as well. And of course, on a wider scale, because of cultural feelings around shame or awkwardness around sex and sexual performance, it's then quite difficult for him to step up to the problem, to get help, to be able to talk about it, to not feel alone. So all of this exacerbates anxiety. And his family background and his early learnings. Don't forget that premature ejaculation can have a hereditary genetic component as well. So the family might be very uptight and awkward about sex as well. All of this adds to layers of anxiety. And if you want to know more about that, feel free to ask your dad about his experience, or maybe don't. What this means is that some guys probably need to work a little bit harder to gain skills, to build skills to last longer at sex and be satisfied. And that's perfectly doable. But anxiety gets in the way. Anxiety makes it quite difficult to learn the things in the first place, to calm and be resourceful, and to put them into practice when we're having sex. Because sex becomes an association of fear, of panic, of difficulty. And there are other cognitive elements to this as well. So maybe as well as anxiety, if a guy in his early life spent a lot of time looking at porn, maybe he was too young, maybe real sex, real partners weren't available yet, but he watched a lot of porn, and that can result in putting sex up on a pedestal. It's a special, precious thing that wasn't accessible to him for a long time. So there's a raised, heightened anticipation and excitement around sex that even when he develops and he gets into relationships and he starts having sex, that continues. And the whole notion of sex is a special activity that adds pressure and anxiety. Porn also leads, as we know, to unrealistic expectations. It's an unrealistic portrayal of sex. That can add layers of pressure as well. Some guys see sexual intercourse as the ultimate test of their masculinity. That's stressful. Some see sex as something that they do. Orgasms are something that they provide. So all of the pressure and the onus is on them to perform. Stressful. That raises anxiety levels. And I think also with anything like this that's uncomfortable or scary, we tend to avoid it. So avoidance is a thing here as well. Guys can often be aware of the problem, but have a kind of just blind faith and hope that it'll eventually go away. And then they don't really gain the skills, and they remain anxious and tense around sex. Yes, I would say that out of that biopsychosocial model, the psychological, the anxiety aspect of it is what we would get to work on first. Now, it's good advice to go and have a checkup, to go and see a doctor, just get checked out to make sure there's nothing biological going on in terms of a prostate problem or something like that. But that's fairly unusual. And so the anxiety is the starting point for overcoming premature ejaculation. There are two main reasons for this. The first reason is, as we're aware, as I've discussed on other videos, the role of the autonomic nervous system in male sexual function. So we know that there is the parasympathetic state, the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, which is our relaxed, rest, digest, resourceful, breathing, open state. And we have to experience that state, that sufficient amount of physical relaxation in order for blood to flow and in order to get an erection, in order to get hard in the first place. And then as we move more and we build up body temperature and we move and we sweat and we feel connected and we feel excited and everything heats up, we make a shift to the other branch of the nervous system, which is the sympathetic state. Now, the sympathetic state is active, activated. Nature takes over, the blood is pumping, and it brings us to all the little functions that take place in order for orgasm and ejaculation to happen. Now, this is an activity over a duration of time, moving from parasympathetic to the sympathetic state. But some guys with anxiety, without a template of how sex can feel when it's lasting longer, this journey happens very, very quickly. It's like a switch, very, very quickly, from one state, from erection to ejaculation very soon afterwards. They don't feel like sexual intercourse is an activity over time. There isn't a smooth transition from one state to another. So by lowering anxiety levels, naturally helps delay the activated fight or flight sympathetic state that anxiety naturally arouses in us. Now, with that explanation, the second reason why we work on the anxiety first is you've probably Googled those articles which are always popular, like 5 tips from a sex expert on how to last longer in bed. Some of the things in those articles aren't bad advice. Some of those things can work. We're looking at breathing and positions and different kinds of movement and things that you can do. But when we're in an anxious state, when we're having sex in a state of panic, danger, threat mode, it's a big ask to be able to put things like that into action. And you may have had a go. You may have, I need to breathe slower. I need to relax. So in the middle of sex, we think, oh no, I'm getting a bit close. Need to breathe, need to relax. And we try it, and then it doesn't really work because it's a big ask. And then we write it off afterwards and say, okay, well, that's another thing that doesn't work. That's another thing that's going to keep me stuck in this situation. When we're less activated, when we're in a relaxed state, we are more resourceful. We can recall the things that help. we can put them, we can utilize them so much more easily. So then we actually have access to our toolbox to make things last a bit longer. So ultimately, being able to relax into sex is a goal. And if we're one of those guys that needs to build on those skills and do the things that help, it can help us find that essential balance of having sex, having intercourse with awareness of our arousal levels and awareness that if it's starting to ramp up, there are things that we can do about it, but not completely focused on that and not completely locked in our heads and panicking and monitoring and am I coming, am I coming? It's finding that balance of inner experience and then being able to connect with our partners and be in the moment. Relaxation makes all the difference there. So do antidepressant pills shortcut this? So we're talking about SSRI medication, which these days is very commonly prescribed off-label to help guys with premature ejaculation. And that can either be a daily dose, an everyday tablet of an SSRI, or there's also duloxetine, which is labelled as Trilogy on the market, which is an SSRI pill that you can take a bit more on demand, like Viagra. You can take it a couple of hours before sexual activity to give it a chance to work. Both of these approaches flood the brain with serotonin levels. Higher serotonin has been proved as a side effect. It can delay the ejaculation response a bit. It's not drastic, but you guys can get a little bit of extra time by taking this medication. Does it help? Yes, it probably does, because the guy gets to experience what it feels like to last a little bit longer. That's positive. Maybe his partner notices the difference, notices the extension, the prolonging, and that helps a little bit and helps take the pressure off. But at the same time, it means that he can kind of carry on functioning, having sex, but without actually picking up any additional skills or insight apart from getting used to taking medication for this. And I think his confidence may build, but it's kind of a superficial, maybe confidence that doesn't really have much foundation. And let's say if he takes the pill on demand, imagine the situation where a partner suggests that she'd like to have sex on a lazy Sunday morning. So he has to set his alarm the night before to be awake at 5 or 6 in the morning in order to take his pill in time for it to work in order to have sex. That's stressful. That's anxiety inducing. Or maybe if he wants to have spontaneous sex, maybe if something just happens and he starts getting it on with his partner, but he hasn't taken his medication and he's very aware of that. Will she notice what's going to happen here? Because the benefits are dependent on having the medication. Stressful and anxiety inducing again. Now, add to that all the potential side effects of SSRI medication. It's a potential stressor in itself. So what starts to work once we are less anxious? What are the things that we can effectively do and utilize once the anxiety levels have come down a bit? So when I'm working with guys and advising on premature ejaculation, I've kind of identified a bunch of things that are actually helpful and are actually part of building those essential skills that I've mentioned. And once we've got lowered anxiety and we're more resourceful, they become useful behavioural things that we can do rather than just promises of quick fix hacks that don't really get a chance to work. So, for example, opening up to sensation, soaking up, getting used to soaking up feelings of pleasure, sometimes intense feelings of pleasure and stimulation, and not having that sense of fear and avoidance that this is going to tip me over the edge. That is much more doable and a much more accessible skill when we're feeling more relaxed and open. The variation of movement and speed and tempo, the actual way that we thrust, the actual way that we penetrate and our body moves, all of these things help. But again, when we're anxious, when we're in panic mode, even remembering to do that, even being able to do it effectively, it goes out of the window. The concept of acclimatization is really relevant here. So we know that when we start having intercourse and we start to move into intercourse, there is an initial wave of pleasure. There are initial waves of intense sensation that, when we're in an aroused emotional state, often have the tendency to push us off, to knock us off the surfboard and just into the water, and it's over. When we become aware that we can actually ride those initial waves, you may have had the experience where when you get over that initial wave of intense pleasure, you get on an even keel, things settle down, and you can kind of notice that actually I can roll with this a lot easier. I've settled in, I've acclimatized to the sensations of sex. This is much easier to do when we're less anxious. Breathing is one of the classic ways of lowering emotional arousal. And there are various ways of learning to breathe deeply and slower and take longer out breaths. But again, like I mentioned, when we're in a panic, anxious, unsafe feeling state, oh, I remember I should breathe here, breathe, breathe, breathe. And it's, again, actively trying to take control when we're stressed already. And for that actually to happen during sex and really make any difference is unlikely. Deep body relaxation, you know, those ancient wisdom, those tantric guys and those gurus, in a way they were onto something. Some of those techniques of focusing sexual energy and the cool draw and feeling that through our bodies, that can be a useful and accessible skill. But again, you cannot be a tantric guru when you are in panic mode. And of course, connection, truly connecting with our partners. When we're locked into panic mode, we're very inward focused, we're hyper vigilant for what's going on in our own bodies. Please, not too fast, not too fast, let's calm this down. We're not able to actually look out and engage with our partners and read her movements, her level of arousal, what's giving her pleasure, what she might desire next, to shift things up, to introduce variety, to be connected, to move in sync. It's very difficult to do all that when we're absorbed in our own inward-looking, anxious state. It's also worth mentioning a few of the things that are often touted out there to help with premature ejaculation that I personally don't think make a great deal of difference, anxious or not. So one of those is Kegels, building up the strength in the PC muscle. I'm not a urologist. I think it's a healthy thing to do. It can have all sorts of health benefits, especially in later life, for bladder control and things like that. So it's a good thing to do, but it's not the go-to solution to premature ejaculation. I also think that the distraction technique, thinking of unsexy things, football teams, grandma, whether it helps or not, it's the opposite of that connected, aware, soaking up sensation state that we really want to aim for here, that really makes for satisfying sex, both for us and our partners. Our partners notice whether we're in the moment and connected or not. Finally, I think supplements, horny goat weed, all these kind of pills, all these supplements and vitamins and minerals and things that are supposed to make a difference, I think it's all nonsense. They may well have a placebo effect. They will not help reduce anxiety around sex. They will not help with performance. And my recommendation is just don't go there. So the $1,000,000 golden unicorn question, how do we get less anxious around sex? Well, I think a starting point here is so many of us don't actually know how to relax at all in general, day to day in life. We don't relax enough. We don't relax deeply enough. We're always on. We're always activated. We're always busy. We're doing things. So this really starts with relaxation techniques, and we have to experience the benefits, the feeling of deep enough relaxation before we can use that in sexual intercourse at all. So that's my starting point, and that's perfectly achievable with a little bit of time and a bit of openness to how these things can work. Now, next we have imagination. We are aware as psychotherapists that imagination is stronger than will. Now, a lot of the things that guys try to do, a lot of the recommendations are about taking control, being active, mastering this, building strength, building stamina, taking control, problem solving in a way that is willpower, white knuckling. It's telling ourselves during sex, I will master this. Now we know that that actually increases layers of expectation and pressure and anxiety, and it doesn't really work. So as an alternative to that, I work with the imagination, with visualization, because we know that with premature ejaculation and confidence issues in general, our imagination very easily, very naturally spins up negative outcomes. It's going to happen again. It's going to feel like that again. It's going to be disappointing. We project forward in a very negative way. And that's our natural bias. So we can shift that and use the imagination in a more helpful and positive way of visualizing what sex can feel like, what changes we can make, how it will feel different in future. Because so much of the negativity is based maybe on imperfect memory or the unchangeable past, and it just doesn't help. If we can visualize, it makes a difference at a very deep level. And we're not just talking about positive thinking here or making things come true. It's proven that the effect of a bit of positive expectation and visualization changes the way that we move, that we breathe, that we connect. It changes the things that we say, the thoughts that we have. And gradually over time, this can make a huge difference to building sexual confidence. Another point on this is setting realistic expectations. Now, if we are alive and we have a sex life, it's being aware that there will always be unpredictable ambiguity around sex. Sometimes it will be a bit flat, sometimes it will be underwhelming, sometimes it will be rubbish, and that is absolutely fine. Acceptance of that, realizing that that's actually part of the beauty, the unpredictability of the experience, makes a huge difference. It's not confirmation, it's not evidence that sex will always be the way, and this is the way we are. It's having a mixed experience which makes us appreciate the highs and the lows, and this applies to any activity, any experience in being alive, and it really makes all the difference as well. If you'd like to know more about my more grounded approach to overcoming premature ejaculation, please take a look at some of the content on the website at bangontime.info. I will be adding more content there and firming up some of these concepts and the strategies that we can use to effectively put them in place. There's also a form on my site where you can anonymously share your experience. You can let us know what things have worked for you, how you've been able to lower anxiety, what your experience has been. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope this is really helpful.